When I said yes to homeschool, I thought I was sacrificing and giving up my opportunity to be a businesswoman. I loved being out in the workforce and those kind of things. And to be honest, I always have worked part-time. But I had to shift my perspective so I had margin in my life to be able to meet the needs that my children had. And it's funny because once it was over, it was like the door opened and my life picked right back up again. I got to speak, I got to write books, and I was a better Anita on the other end doing that because of what I experienced with homeschool. It's kind of like what we said earlier is sometimes we think homeschool was for the kids. I think it's just as much for the parents.
Welcome to Homeschool Talks, a podcast by HSLDA. This is a show about all things homeschooling, from practical tips to inspiring stories and everything in between. We're so glad you've joined us today, and we hope you enjoy the program.
Hi, I'm Jim Mason, Vice President at Homeschool Legal Defense Association, and welcome back to Homeschool Talks. I'm very excited today to welcome my guest, Anita Gibson. Anita is a speaker, a writer, and happens to be one of our educational consultants here at HSLDA. Welcome, Anita.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
So tell us, what do you do at HSLDA first?
Well, I am a high school educational consultant, and I am the team lead. So what we do is we help members with questions about high school, from A to Z, transcripts and curriculum and all those kinds of things. And I help with the team and just helping us to be able to help our members.
So how did you gain experience such that you can advise other people about high school? Good
question. Because, you should have some experience if you're going to tell other people
right.
how to do it, right? So my husband and I homeschooled our children for over 20 years. Kindergarten through 12th grade, and now they're all in their 30s. We're empty nesters and loving it.
So let's run down the lineup of your children.
Okay, our oldest, her name is Lauren. She is a foreign diplomat. She works for the State Department. She's fluent in French and Vietnamese, and she's currently working on Korean.
Oh, my.
So she has a 5-year assignment in Korea. Our middle daughter, Danielle, is a elementary education teacher, and she actually also teaches chemistry, biology, and physical science in the homeschool community. And our son is an entrepreneur, and he is a videographer and photographer, and he actually is self-taught. He did not go to college, and he is currently working as the production lead at a mega church. His gifts were just that strong that it was recognized like, wow, you're good. And was able to get a job in that way. So everybody had a different path, but isn't that what homeschool is all about?
Yeah, that's a really good point. And, I just read this chapter in this amazing book. And the book, for those of you out there, it's called Homeschooling Black Children in the U.S., and Anita has a chapter in it called Become a Star Finder.
Yes.
So how did it come about that you wrote this chapter for this book? And then let's get into it, because I found this chapter to be extraordinarily inspiring and helpful, and I think that our listeners will find it to be so too.
So we had a dilemma in our family. Our first daughter, I don't remember teaching her how to read. But at very, very young, 2 or 3 years old, she's reading. And so I just thought, since she was our first daughter, that's what everybody did. And so when the next daughter came along, it was like, hey, what's going on? You're 2, you're 3, you're not reading. You're 4, you're 5, you're 6, you're 8.
This is Danielle.
You're 9, and you're not reading. And so then we started doing testing because there must be something wrong. And what we found out is there was absolutely nothing wrong. And that we had done Danielle a disservice. We had not honored who she was because we hadn't taken the time to find out what type of learner she was. And so we had some damage control to do. We had to go back and apologize to her for comparing her to her sister. And then we had to kind of start again with her. And so the Star Finder comes from me understanding or beginning to understand that every child has strengths. This STAR is actually an acronym: talents, abilities, and resources. And it's my opportunity as a parent to find out what those things are.
Well, I think it was fascinating in reading the chapter, your journey with Danielle. Do you mind sharing some more of the details of how you found the STAR in Danielle?
Yeah. So that story is in some ways is bittersweet because I did make so many mistakes as a parent, and had to rethink just how to minister to Danielle. And so she thought she was dumb. She thought she wasn't smart because she wasn't reading well. She'd go to Sunday school, and you know how they have you pull out the Sunday school books and everybody's reading. So she can't read. So in all her environments, even though she's homeschooled, it's still this appearance that there's something wrong with her. And so what we realized and she did everything slow, everything. So if we were walking out the door and I had told them 30 minutes ago to get ready because we need to get somewhere, everybody is ready and I'm walking out the door because I have 20,000 things going on, and I look behind me and Danielle's still sitting in a chair, probably with no shoes on. So we're going to be late to wherever we're going. And after a while, I began to realize that I was moving too fast, and God had given me Danielle to teach me the beauty of slow. Because in my mind, fast people were the smart ones and slow people were not. And what I learned through her is that if you were sick and you had a doctor who did everything very quickly and he looked at your chart and said, "You look great," and he could tell you that right then, but he was wrong, versus a doctor who said, it's going to take me a few weeks to look at all your charts. But he was so detailed that in looking, he found that small tumor that was going to grow over in the corner, and he was able to give you a solution. And that was when I was able to share that with Danielle to help her reframe this slow aspect of her, to be able to say, which doctor would you want? And she said, of course, the one that would find the cancer. It's like, well, that's how God has made you. You're detail oriented. You process things in a way that you're not going to go through it quickly. And so as I reframed my mind about who Danielle was, she could then begin to reframe her own mind.
It's one of the amazing things. So we have 7 children, homeschooled them all. And it's, I think it's kind of a universal truth that parents actually learn so much about themselves, about how the Lord made people, because with 7 children, we had 7, they're really very different people.
Yes.
And that's one of the amazing things about your story, is really coming to grips with it's okay to be different.
Yes.
And then how did that change your homeschooling experience going forward?
So I don't like animals, and Danielle loves them. So I had hamsters and rabbits and critters in my house. Drove me crazy. It took all that I had within me to let her bring that stuff in. But that was the one thing that we saw that she loved, and she did really well. Whatever she touched, it grew. She started selling the hamsters and the rabbits to the pet store. And so I had to give up my right to what I wanted for my house. At one point, she was so good at it. She had a litter of rabbits. I think she had 16 rabbits. And we lived in a townhouse. And we had this little yard out back that looked like Little House on the Prairie, with the hutches and, the garden, little box gardens. It just was, we learned that we had to infuse our environment with the things that would nurture and grow Danielle. And no one else in the house could have animals, only her.
Well, what else did you learn throughout this 20 years of homeschooling? and I guess, how much has that helped you in the job you have now?
Wow. Definitely things like don't expect what you don't inspect. Wait
a minute. Now, okay, I was in the Navy. Okay. This sounds kind of familiar.
My father was in the Air Force.
Is that where you learned this one?
It was the principle of the thing. But in my house, I learned don't expect what you don't inspect, because my son and I would have arguments about taking out the trash. And people are like, taking out the trash, what does that have to do with homeschool? Well, homeschool is about life. It's not just academics. And so the goal is to teach them to be disciplined in all areas. So we'd be in arguments because I would say, you told me you took out the trash and you didn't take out the trash. And he said, yes, I did. And I'm like, no, you didn't. And then as we started, fussing about it. Finally, it was like, you know what? I have always assumed he knew what I meant when I said, take out the trash. And so then I sat and I started writing down all the steps to taking out the trash. And it's like, you have to pick up all the trash around the trash can. And then you have to tie the trash can off. And then you bag off. And then you have to walk it to the trash can out in the backyard. And then you have to put the top, take it off, and then put the top back on. And then you have to walk back in. And then you have to put a trash bag in the trash can. That's like 7 steps. No wonder he wasn't emptying the trash. So once we sat down, we actually worked it out together so that we both understood. We put a little chart on the wall. We never had to talk about taking out the trash again because now we were both on the same page.
Well, one of the things I gathered from your book is that you homeschooled all 3 of your kids 100% of the time for all 12 years of their education.
Is that what you got?
That's what I got. Did I miss it?
Oh, you did.
Well, tell us about that, because a lot of people listening to the podcast out there may be kind of new to homeschooling, and it may seem like a daunting prospect for them
Absolutely.
to take on the education of their own children. So how did you manage to do it with 3 kids for over 20 years?
So what you learn is that it is not your responsibility to teach everything. You are a facilitator. And if I could bring homeschool down to its smallest common denominator, I would say homeschool is teaching your children how to learn. So once they learn how to learn, they can learn whatever they need to learn, and they're not going to learn it all from you. If I'm not good at math, why would I want to struggle through math with my child when I could hire a tutor who is brilliant at math and can help them get through it well? And so the goal is facilitate, find the best in the different areas, connect them with those experts, and just allow them to be able to soar.
What was your experience with the broader homeschooling community when your kids were coming up?
Well, when we first started, people thought we were crazy. And we started back in the 80s. And also being Black or African American in our culture, it was like we were traitors, because it's like we fought so hard to join to get into this equal access to this public school system. And you're going to what? You don't know what you're doing, and you don't even have a degree in elementary education. And it was like, well, this is what we feel like God is calling us to do. And so we're going to move forward, and hopefully things will go well. But yes, for many years, everybody was waiting for it to implode. And after a while, they started noticing the intelligence and the ingenuity and the creativity of our children, and began to see that, maybe there is something to this homeschool thing.
Were you able to find community in the early days, or did that come later?
We actually did. We joined an organization called Valley Brook, which was out of, it was in Maryland, and they've moved a couple times. I think it ended up becoming Cedar Brook, but that was a place for us where we, Dave Smith was our evaluator, and he would help look at our work. And they also had group classes for the kids. So there was that place for them to be able to connect. It is critical to do homeschool in community. It is not a Lone Ranger kind of thing.
And in that community, how did your kids fare? As the question we always get asked is, what about the kids? They're going to grow up to be weird. How do they get socialized?
Right. Well, they did very well. But what I really believe is First of all, if you can get along with your mother and father and your 7 brothers and sisters at home all day, it's not going to be that hard to learn how to get along with other people. And so what I found was a lot of the socialization started with us as a team, learning how to give each other space, being gracious to each other when we're getting on each other's nerves. And then it moved into being able to connect, with the other kids in the co-op and in life and with grandparents and, with people at church. And it wasn't just with peers. It was them learning how to connect with all people.
That's a really important lesson that we learned as a family as well. My oldest and youngest are, I think, 15 years apart. And she's just going into college this fall. And he's now a coach at a Division 1A school. And they're like really good friends. It's amazing. All 7 of my kids, boy, you better not cross any one of them. They might get in spats, but nobody else should get in, in the way. And I think homeschooling really helped us as a family to, just really have a strong bond that I never really imagined could be possible. So your chapter is in this book called Homeschooling Black Children in the U.S., edited by, I don't know, Khadija.
Yes, Khadija Ali Coleman.
I don't know her, but I have met Cheryl
yes.
Field Smith, and she's actually been a guest on this podcast before.
Okay, nice.
And so this is a pretty big topic being written about. It was in Christianity Today, just this last issue.
Okay.
You mentioned earlier that years ago, homeschooling in the Black community was not very popular.
No.
But it seems to be rising in popularity. What do you think about that?
I think that Black parents want to have more impact. I think they want to create environments that will support and encourage their students in ways where they can actually intersperse culture in history and those kinds of things. And I think that they realized they can do a better job than where their students were. And I think with the pandemic, they actually were surprised at maybe some of what their children were getting or not getting.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's maybe a universal experience amongst parents who found their kids at home through the pandemic. But it does seem like there's a marked increase in the Black community, maybe in the last, 4 or 5 years?
Gosh, yeah. And definitely with the pandemic, I think I heard a statistic, something like 16% of the increase in the Black community. I think it is the opportunity to have more control, to come against some of the negativity in our environments, about who we are or who we're not, to be able to kind of help our children to see who they are in a different light, which gives them more confidence and understanding about how the beauty that God has made us all beautiful. I think that there's a speaker, her name is Amber O'Neill. And she is an African-American woman who writes a lot about it's called Mom Heritage, I think is the name of her organization. And she talks about mirrors and windows, and that children who grow up healthy are able to have mirrors in their environment that show them who they are, but also windows that help them to see the beauty of who others are. So that it's not a us and them, it's a we, and that there's beauty in each of our cultures, and we want to learn how to honor that.
Well, that's really good. I enjoyed this chapter very much, and I think it just resonated with me because it was, you told some personal stories, and the real secret sauce, it seems to me, is parents who love their children, right? And you say, your first, question is, you say the answer to your first question is no. So you have to say no if you're going to start doing this. You explain it.
Right. So when you say yes to homeschool, you have to say no to a lot of other things. Mm-hmm. And you have to let things go for a while, because this takes all your heart, mind, soul, emotions, time, just for a season. When I said yes to homeschool, I thought I was sacrificing and giving up my opportunity to be a businesswoman. I loved being out in the workforce and those kind of things. And to be honest, I always have worked part-time. But I had to shift my perspective so I had margin in my life to be able to meet the needs that my children had. And it's funny because once it was over, it was like the door opened and my life picked right back up again. I got to speak, I got to write books, and I was a better Anita on the other end doing that because of what I experienced with homeschool. It's kind of like what we said earlier, is sometimes we think homeschool was for the kids. I think it's just as much for the parents.
Well, that reminds me of early on in my homeschool career. A friend of my wife's really wanted to homeschool her kids. And her husband, he was this hard-nosed guy from Massachusetts, and he had this real thick Boston accent, and he was really smart. He was actually a chaplain at a federal penitentiary. So he was kind of a hard guy, right? And big, tall guy and super kind of athletic. And so his wife set up a date for the two couples to get together so that I could persuade him to let her homeschool her kids. And the first thing he said is, why should I be able to homeschool? And I said, well, with that attitude, you shouldn't, And in fact, if you're not ready to, give up everything to do this, don't do it. It's hard. You have to be committed. And he went, so he almost immediately agreed to start homeschooling because now it's a challenge, right?
Okay.
And he became a local homeschool leader out of it. I mean, because he wasn't willing to do it. But then when he realized, it's not just a thing you flip a switch.
That's right.
It's a real commitment.
Yes.
And he was very much wanting his children to get the best. Mm-hmm. And he could see that if he could throw his life into it, it would be better for his kids.
Wow.
So what's some more good stuff in this chapter here? I've highlighted some things. How to help your children develop their strengths. And why is it that homeschool parents can do that kind of better?
Oh my goodness. Think about lots of athletes and performers. A lot of them are homeschoolers because it gives you the opportunity to focus in a way that you can't do in a traditional academic environment. A strength is something that the more you develop it, the larger it can grow. And so in homeschool, we have the opportunity to, first of all, be intentional about finding what those areas of strength are, and then being able to create environments and opportunities where they can grow those strengths. And when you invest time in your child's strengths, you are investing in their future. And it doesn't mean you're going to know exactly what job they're going to have. But the more that you invest in those strengths, by the time they start getting into those high school years, things are going to begin to present because this huge gift is going to be presenting in the midst of them. And it's going to become a little more clear that, I think we're kind of moving over in that direction. So I am a strengths finder. Anything that has to do with strengths, I think, is core to anybody's homeschool program. I have a story. Do you have a moment?
I do.
So I had a mom come in to me and she said, she was sitting and she's just furious. She's like, my 6-year-old, he keeps breaking up everything. I keep telling him, stop touching my stuff. And then I'll go in a room and that my clock or my whatever it is kind of crumpled up sitting on a table somewhere. And I'm like, Trey, why did you bother that? I cannot get him to stop breaking up my stuff. I'm so frustrated. What do I need to do? And I thought a moment and I was like, what if Trey is an engineer and he needs to understand how things work? And so he's breaking it up because he's so curious. So how about you go to a thrift store, buy some stuff that he can break up to his heart's content, give him a little section of the house that's kind of his little workshop, and see if he stops breaking up your stuff. And sure enough, she did it. She reported back, he has stopped breaking up my stuff. And that was when he was maybe 5 or 6. So by the time Trey got to 10th grade, he was already at the university taking trig and calculus and was on the road to becoming an engineer.
Wow. And in your own story with Danielle, when you identified that she loved to take care of animals and had really detail oriented, and she worked slow, but she figured things out.
Yes.
How did she turn out? I think you mentioned it earlier, but let's just put a cap on that story too.
So because I started out not understanding about comparison and comparing her to her sister, we had some damage control to do. Danielle's esteem took some hits. And so we had part of finding her strength was us realizing we needed to show her what her beauty was, what her superpower was. And her superpower was nurture. And think about taking care of something. You have to observe, you have to pay attention, you have to notice what's needed. And so again, that eye for detail came into the nurture. And so as we began to infuse our house with places and opportunities for her to be able to grow, her esteem began to grow. She began to become more confident. She wanted to start reading now, because reading was like this place of pain. It's like frustrating. Every other word, I'm not getting it. But now I want to read because I want to know more about my animals. I want to take better care of my rabbits. So when we go to the library, now she's checking out these books that are at these higher levels, not because mom is pushing, but because now she wants to know. And as her reading increased, because reading is the foundation to all learning, all her other subjects began to pull up and get better. And it started with her nurturing animals.
What is she doing today?
Danielle is she has her degree in elementary education.
Oddly enough.
But guess what? And because what she realized was she knew how it felt to not get it and to have people around you who assumed you were dumb. And that it wasn't you, it was them, that it was their responsibility to teach it in another way that you could get it. And so she became an excellent teacher because she threw it at the kids at 4 or 5 different ways. Maybe you don't get it like this, but you'll get it like that. She added in she infused all kinds of hands-on kinds of things in her learning and just became a sought after science teacher in our homeschool co-op. And when she kind of stepped away from that to do some other things for like 3 years, people would call me and say, is your daughter going to teach science again? And I was like, sorry, guys, she's moved on.
Well, it's a wonderful story, and in homeschooling just in general. I mean, you mentioned one of your kids became a self-taught videographer,
yes,
and is now working in the department at the church. One of my own sons did the same thing.
Okay,
he went to college and got a degree in biology of all things, and he came to me one day and said, I really just want to start producing videos. And he started slow, and today he makes a really good living being a self-employed video guy, doing music videos and commercials and things. And our producer, don't tell him, but our producer right behind us,
yes,
he's kind of a self-taught video guy too. So if it turns out bad, it's my fault. It's not his fault.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of the things about homeschooling, though, right? So a guest on this podcast a couple of weeks ago, 2 brothers who won the Lego Masters, right? Lego?
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
2 homeschool brothers won that.
Wow.
Because what you mentioned, they could devote so much of their time. I mean, they had an interest.
Yes.
And they could devote as much time as they needed to that interest. And they made it into a career.
Wow.
It's toys. but
Okay.
it's toys. Sorry. So let's get back to your book. You mentioned that you have an entire book.
Yes.
And is it called Become a Starfinder?
It's called Starfinder.
Starfinder.
Mm-hmm.
Once again, what is STAR an acronym for?
S is for strengths, T is for talents, A is for abilities, and R is for resources.
And where can people find your book, Starfinder?
If you put Anita Gibson into Amazon.com, the book will pop right up.
Very cool. Well, tell us a little bit about your high school consulting work here at HSLDA.org, where you can visit and find out more about Homeschool Legal Defense Association. That's HSLDA.org.
We love what we do. After having homeschooled for over 20 years, the idea of being able to sit with a mom who's just starting, or a mom who is about to enter high school, and to offer her encouragement and comfort, to let her know that you can do this. And it's usually moms that call. Sometimes it is dads. But just the opportunity to learn all the things that we're learning and being able to share those with people and giving them hope, because what our motto is making homeschool possible, and it's possible for many, many people, many more than think they can.
Mm-hmm. What are some of the main concerns you deal with when parents are just entering the high school years?
Oh my gosh, they freak out. It's kind of like, am I going to ruin my child? That's, I think, the thing I hear the most is, I'm going to mess them up. And then they're not going to be able to, do well in life. And it's like, it's okay. You're going to be all right. You started in the right place. You're not trying to Lone Ranger this. When you join HSLDA, you have just acquired the encyclopedia, the toolbox for homeschool. And we will walk you through everything that you need to get through. I mean, everything. And it is very comforting for them to know I don't have to get it all in one call. I can ask a question here. I can email something in. And piece by piece, we're helping them to grow and build their homeschool.
Now, you had children who left homeschooling and went on to college. Is that a frequent question you get? How do I...
Absolutely. Do I have to have accredited curriculum? And when I explain our story that our, girls were homeschooled from K through 12, and colleges, are very accepting of homeschoolers now. Back in the 80s, not so much. But now they're finding that a lot of times homeschool students are self-learners. They tend to be a little more disciplined. This is a generality, right? But in general, they're actually more prepared for college than the average student.
Well, any final thoughts or words from this chapter, from your life as a homeschool mom, your career as a writer, speaker, homeschool consultant? Any last words to help the folks out there?
Don't compare your child's life, their present, their future, by your past. Because what we experienced coming up is a very different world than what they live in. Open your eyes and see the beauty of your child and the opportunity that you have to homeschool them where they are right now and who they are right now, with no comparisons.
Really good words to live by. Anita, thank you so much. My guest today, Anita Gibson. She's written a chapter in Homeschooling Black Children in the U.S. And a book called Starfinder. She's full of grace and wisdom, and I really appreciated talking with you today. And for Homeschool Legal Defense Association and Homeschool Talks, I'm Jim Mason, Vice President, and we'll see you next time.
Today's program is made possible by HSLDA's team of educational consultants. Are you feeling overwhelmed by the number of curriculum options to choose from? Or maybe you're frustrated because your child is struggling and you're not sure what to do next? Our educational consultants can help. As an HSLDA member, you have access to customized, practical guidance on everything from lesson planning and record keeping to helping a child with learning difficulties. If you want to experience less frustration and more progress in your homeschool, get support from our educational consultants by becoming a member of HSLDA. Learn more at hslda.org/join. That's hslda.org/join. Thanks for listening to this episode of Homeschool Talks. If you enjoyed this conversation, leave a review to let us know what you think. To hear more conversations like this one, be sure to subscribe to this podcast or head on over to hslda.org/podcast for more inspiring stories and awesome ideas about homeschooling. That's all for today. We hope you enjoyed the program, and we'll see you next time.